Hi, very good afternoon. It's Jim from Avstar. I've got a couple of questions for you guys a bit later on in this video, but I just wanted to say, someone earlier on when I was checking my junk mail accused me of going to NASA and obtaining their positions and then regurgitating. But as far as I'm aware, NASA don't publish the magnetic North Pole position. And NOAA, the last time they did it was in 2015, and they left us in the dark with a prediction of 2016, and since then I don't know where the magnetic North Pole is with regards to what they're saying, only what we've been doing at the Observatory with the Trimag system. So, I'm bewildered why someone first of all would accuse me of that. I mean, I took it completely as a compliment, but I was surprised. But I'll tell you this, even if they was publishing the geomagnetic North Pole position on a regular basis, I wouldn't trust it. Would you guys trust it? Do you guys trust anything that comes out of the governments around the world in this day and age when it comes down to giving the public information? Or, truthful information is the more important thing to say. Because I don't. And I've had a little look on this website, NASA's website, for what he might be talking about. I would be interesting to see what position they're putting the magnetic North Pole at and compare it to where we are. And I would do a video on that, and I would say, look, that's NASA's idea of where the magnetic North Pole is. That's ours. And this is the longitude and latitude of theirs, and this is the longitude and latitude of ours. But I wouldn't trust that what they're showing us is the truth, because they don't give information out. Someone told me that they worked at the ESA that collects the data on the Swarm mission, but they're not allowed to interpret that information. That has to be done off-site by another department. I find that very unusual. Why is there so much secrecy around the position of the magnetic North Pole within these departments? Well, I don't know. I'll leave it to you. You give me some ideas why that might be. The other thing is, talking about world leaders, I can't believe what's going on over in America. And I don't care, I'm not on no sides with the Republicans or the Democrats or anyone else. I have my own point of view. And I just want to say this, and I wonder if you're an American and you would agree with this. On this statement that Donald Trump said, he said, I've had lots of countries' leaders ring me up to kiss my arse to reduce the tariffs. Is that how anyone talks to anyone? Should that be the way that anyone talks, let alone a president? It's unbelievable. And the other thing is, and I understand this, guys, if you're an American, you want manufacturing returned. You've lost 90,000 businesses according to what Donald Trump has been talking about, but whether you believe that or not is another thing. But I understand you want jobs to come back, but do you want to pay £400 for an umbrella as opposed you can get one probably now for $20? You know why I say that? It's because think about this. I think it's really ungrateful that we have been allowed to exploit the labour and the cheap labour of the Chinese for as long as what we have. Why would you want to rock the boat on that? Because if we have to manufacture our own umbrellas, like here in the UK or in America, we have got to pay a British or an American person at least minimum wage. How much do you think that umbrella's going to cost? Me or you? At that point. So it's a good thing that we've got China manufacturing those things and that they're prepared to work for a lesser wage than what we are. I'll give you a comparison. An average wage for a Chinese person in dollars is around $400 a month. And the average wage for an American is between $3,000 and $5,000 a month. So can you imagine if Americans were manufacturing their own umbrellas, how much they're going to cost? Another thing I've seen talk about a lot today is the price of iPhones. Because of the tariffs, an iPhone might cost over $2,000 now. I think it might even cost more because of those tariffs, because iPhone is assembled in China. Now, I know people in the comment section are going to say, yeah, but that company is coming back to the United States. But when it does, just remember how much they earn a month, $400 compared to $3,000 to $5,000 in America. that iPhone could cost £9,000 to £10,000. Yep. So it was a good thing that China were prepared to work for what they were, and that's why manufacturing went over to China in the first place, to exploit that labour. Yes, well, you can argue the ethics of it, whether it was fair or not, on, you know, exploiting Chinese people for their low wage, or, you know, the Americans giving away their jobs to the Chinese to start with. Who's at fault? You know, again, you tell me in the comments section. So, you know, I don't understand Trump's methodology in these tariffs. But the other thing I want to say is, you know, it probably took 50 years for eventually those businesses to go over to China, and, you know, the tariffs. I understand, you know, there's an imbalance there, but my point is this: it's been at the direction of the previous presidents, and it should have been done a lot slower. If it took 50 years to get to this point, you know, Donald Trump has just flicked the switch, and in an immediate about turn, you know, slapped massive tariffs on China and other countries around the world, even his allies and friends, which is, I think, a very sad thing. Though I was getting to a point on that. The problem is, the reason why the markets reacted the way they did with, you know, things like the S&P is because of the uncertainty in the market, you know, and still there is an uncertainty. With Donald Trump adjusting the tariff rates on a fortnightly basis, you know, companies don't know whether to load the container up, put it on the ship, because if the ship arrives in America in another week and a half or 2 weeks' time, you know, the tariff price could have doubled. And that's a big gamble if you're in business. That thing can put you out of business, as it is already putting out a load of people out of business. I think I heard around 80 million people are out of business at the moment in China. And I don't care what anyone says, you know, I completely sympathise with that. That is sad. It doesn't matter who you are around the world. I think, you know, when you see that sort of devastation happen so quickly, you know, where one moment you've got plenty of orders, next minute all your orders are cancelled. You've been at the game for 40 years, you know, you're a reasonably priced competitor in the market, and you've been penalised for being, you know, doing your best and working for the lowest bidder. You know, it's not fair and it's not right. But give me your points of view on these things, guys. The only other thing I want to say is, you know, I know times are hard for all of us, but we have to make the best with what we've got. And, you know, the sad thing is, we can lose things that are useful to us, things that we rely on, you know, when we're pushed up against the wall and we have to make tough decisions. But you know what? If we lose this observatory here that measures the magnetic North Pole for the general public around the world, and I don't expect people in Afghanistan to give me any money because I know what sort of breadline they're living on, but, you know, us Westerners are still able to, you know, go about our lives. We still have a small expendable amount of cash. But, you know, if you have an interest in this topic, then do your very best not to let this channel go and this observatory go, because there is a limit to my own charity here. You know, we've got some big bills coming up for the website, and the reason for that is because of the amount of data that we've got on that website, because we've got a 5-year archive on a few pages now of data. You know, that costs me money, and I can't absorb those costs. You know, I'm already prepared to still carry on doing this whilst working a full-time job as well. So if you can help, there's a link down there in the description, or become one of our patrons. You know, there's 2 opportunities there for any one of you out there that want to seriously, you know, support the work that we do. Because I have promised, you know, at least once a month at the moment, with the way things are, with the amount of revenue that we raise, I will still deliver the pole shift. But you know, I can't have it, you know, if we lose that archive of 5 years on there, man, I've got it backed up on my computer, but if we lose the archive, which is the public archive, that's a massive loss for you guys. You know, there's a lot of truth in not just the TriMag data, but the Earth at a glance. You know, the recorded data of the volcanoes, the earthquakes, the CO2 levels, the oxygen levels. It's an archive going back 4.5 years in its own right. You know, there's your comparisons there. You can go back. If any of the politicians come out with nonsense related to these things, you can go back and check for yourselves. You know, if people say in the comment section, we've got an exponential increase in volcanic activity, check the Earth at a glance. You'll know the truth. So, you know, anyhow, I am interested in your opinions on some of the things we've talked about. Put them in the comment section and I'll read them later. I might even answer a few of them as well if I've got the time. So, you know, enjoy the rest of your day. Or, as always, take care of your loved ones, you know, and think about some of the things that we're facing, you know, and not in you know, what's the word? Try and think logically is another way of saying what I was hoping to say, I think. But you know, I suppose that must be age, mustn't it? You know, I'm getting on now. I'm 52, so I'm not a spring chicken. Anyway, guys, have an amazing day. Links down there. Just get behind your observatory, and I'll say what you should do. As always, bye for now.